Mr. and Mrs. Bennet are both in their ways problems. We should pay attention to them. They're central to this novel in various ways. Remember, the opening scene of dialogue is between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. Their relationship is fractured, is broken from the beginning, and is a matter of laughter and despair. They are interesting. If we want to do a psychological reading of the daughters, they matter. I would say even more importantly, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet represent, and this is not a commonplace, this is me, represent strategies of reading this novel, both of which the novel tries to put aside or show or its limits to be shown. Let me go with two things here. First of all, um, in terms of the psychodynamics of the depicted world in the world, not in the form, but in the imaginary world, to the degree that we can give these five Bennett sisters any psychology, and that's dubious, there's only what's on the page, it's clear they have been raised by two parents, one of whom is in various ways, like Mrs. Bennet is very clearly a train wreck from chapter one and gets train wreckier every chapter. Mr. Bennet's a problem too. Part of the problem of the novel is the five sisters have kind of psychological or emotional allegiance to one parent or the other. They have a broken, this marriage is broken. Eventually, Elizabeth goes beyond her allegiance to her father to see that her father is also a flawed person, a bad parent, and a terrible husband. Right? At this moment, Elizabeth, the narrative shows us Elizabeth is ready to go find another husband, or Elizabeth realizes how much she needs a man psychologically, sociologically, economically, and she needs someone who is less like her father. Okay, so that's all kind of narrative psychology. It only goes so far. I would also point out, but it is absolutely the case that, and one of Bennett's problems, Mr. Bennett's problems, is that he is too passive. He is laissez-faire. He lets the girls do whatever they want. Makes it. He's an indulgent parent, but he's also gonna let them get in trouble. And he. But the other problem is more subtle and more cunning on Austen's part. Now, as I suggested before, Mrs. Bennet represents a way of reading this novel with too much attention to the marriage plot. This novel has a standard marriage plot. It has one, nay, two, or if we count, maybe three boy-girl plots that are about like wedding bells ringing out all over. But Austen knows how cliched and hacky that can be, so she's embedded this character, Mrs. Bennet, who expects things to go always in a more conventional way, who represents the generic demands of the marriage plot, and who is laughed at. We are doing that novel, but we're also in some ways offloading the desire for this kind of plot resolution onto Mrs. Bennet. And if Mrs. Bennet seems like a misogynist stereotype to you, she does to me. The fact that Austen is a woman doesn't mean she can't write a misogynist stereotype. There's a lot of hate for the female characters in this play who aren't Elizabeth or Jane. Um, Mrs. Bennet is a kind of monster piece, I'd say, of misogyny, of misogynist things. That's fine. Mr. Bennet, who is we are much slower to see the problem with, represents the reading style of the comic novel. This is a romance. This novel, Pride and Prejudice, has a marriage plot. It is about couples getting hitched. It's about the fiesta of heterosexuality and with money attached. It is also a comic novel. It is meant to be funny. It is satirical. It is ironic. Mr. Bennet represents the satirical and ironic point of view. His favorite daughter, Elizabeth, who's the reader's favorite daughter, has inherited this. Mr. Darcy throws it in her face early on, like, oh, you seem to want to laugh at everybody. Yeah, because she's daddy's girl. But the novel also shows eventually just laughing at everybody is also flawed. A comic novel that goes nowhere, but we're going to mock everybody, is also, Austen suggests to Mr. Bennet, has its limits. That there's only so far you can go with irony. This is incredibly cunning and innovative on Austen's part. That her novel is about two basic things, and she's created two characters who embody those ways of reading and then made them both look bad. It's a way of using them as a lightning rod to get away with, to kind of deny the thing, deny the thing they're doing. Um, there's an old Roman form of a rhetorical form. It's about which is about renouncing the thing, but I will not do this. But you can give an example of how you're doing it. These characters are that thing, both.